Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You are listening to episode 1 of season 2. And thank you to those of you who did listen to our first season. It was a total of 100 episodes. So for those of you that made it through them all, you can apply for a medal. But no, actually, don't do that. I haven't got a medal to give. I'll give you a little bird badge.
Oh, a sticker. Can have a sticker if you want.
Yeah, all right. If you listen to all 100, let me know and I'll send you a little sticker. So for those of you who perhaps are new to the podcast or have not heard all the episodes, we thought it might be helpful to give you a little bit of a recap as to who I am, who the gentleman sitting opposite me that you can't see if you're listening is. This is John. Say hi to the listeners, John.
Hi, everybody.
So the podcast started last January, and initially it was myself and my friend Lulu. We were the presenters, and John was very much behind the scenes doing the production. Now, as you can probably tell from the first couple of episodes, we had no experience of podcasting, broadcasting, or my post-it note telling me where to look has just fallen down. I wasn't even looking at it anyway. And it just became something that we loved. I realised very early on that talking to people and finding out their stories and what enabled them to get through the most traumatic experience of their lives was incredibly rewarding, but also incredibly interesting. I love people. I love talking to people. And it's opened my eyes to so much. You know, there's so much I didn't know about grief, despite having experienced it myself.
Me too.
So, sorry, I digress. This is something else you'll get used to if you're new to the podcast. Lulu stepped back from the podcast. We didn't fall out. She actually appears in episode 100, but it became a kind of behemoth of a thing, didn't it? We loved it and we kind of immersed ourselves in it, but it was too much for Lou at the time. So she stepped back, and initially I was going to go solo, and then one day I roped John in as a co-host, and it really worked.
The rest is history.
Yeah. So the interviews I tend to conduct on my own because that can be quite difficult when you've got two people asking questions of somebody. But you will hear John's voice quite regularly, and it's a really important asset to the podcast because men don't talk about their grief and their mental health as much as they perhaps should. So John is here to provide a kind of welcome counterbalance to my incessant chatter. So I wanted to just kind of, again, this may be repetition for a lot of you, but I suppose it's an opportune moment to just give you a little bit of a recap of who we are. And I guess the name says it all. We're both widowed as fuck. My husband, my first husband, my dead husband, because I have two. I have an alive husband who's sitting opposite me, John, and I have a dead husband called Ben. And it's still 6 years on, quite difficult sometimes to talk about because it hurts. It hurts a lot. It doesn't stop hurting just because time has passed. But having the opportunity to speak about him and to speak to other people about their loss has been actually really invaluable as part of my, I'm going to say it, healing journey. So Ben, he died in a scuba diving accident and off the coast of Dover. So it gets less glamorous when you say the coast of Dover. People, picture some sort of Caribbean blue sea. It was horrible. It was traumatic, and it was incredibly scary. And his body has actually never been found, which did add an enormous complication to his death. I have recorded an interview myself, which is episode 3. If you do want to go back and have a listen to the story in full, and I may do another one at some point now. I've got a little bit more experience behind the microphone. But I guess I'm just showing my widow credentials to those of you out there that are looking for, I guess, a voice. We all want to feel like we're not alone in whatever we're experiencing. And I suppose, this sounds really wanky, but I'm going to say it anyway. I sort of wanted to be a constant, a voice, a support, somewhere that you could come and basically anything you're experiencing, we will have been through it too, or one of our guests will have. We have had guests whose partners have died from suicide, from drug abuse, from cancer. We have sudden deaths. I'm reeling off the selection of sweets I've got. Oh my God. But it is, there's something for everybody. And one thing we found quite surprising was how many people were listening who weren't widowed, and the insight it was able to give them into how to support somebody grieving.
Yeah.
And a lot of it applies to all sorts of bereavement. It isn't specific to losing your respective other. But if you think about it, if you're in a romantic relationship, or if you plan to be in one, then one of you is going to die.
True.
The chances are you're not going to go out in a blaze of glory together. So you are going to either be widowed, or your other half is going to be widowed. And I know the term widow is traditionally used to describe women whose husbands have died. But within this podcast, we use it to describe anybody whose romantic partner has died. Yeah. Whatever your orientation, sexuality, gender, it doesn't matter. If you have lost somebody that you love, you are considered widowed within our world. So I'm just going to let John tell you very briefly about his how he ended up in the club that nobody wants to join.
So I'm on a similar timeline to you, but I'd say not as brutal death, just a different kind of death. So
just a different kind of brutality, yeah, really.
So my dead wife is called Sarah, and she had a genetic condition which caused bowel cancer in the family, and she got bowel cancer in the July of 2018 and was gone by November. And those people who've witnessed cancer and what cancer does in that speed will know exactly how brutal that can be. Yeah,
we often have this conversation, and it's something that is talked about when WIDs get together, isn't it? And it's, what is worse? Is it worse to lose somebody suddenly and not know what happened? Or is it worse to have to watch the person you love deteriorate? And generally, I don't think there is a worse. I think both come with their own trauma and horror. Mm. And even when you're expecting somebody to die, you still have the shock of them dying.
It's still a shock when they actually do die, yeah.
And one common theme that we have a lot with cancer widows, because primarily we do attract a slightly younger audience, so you get a lot of young, seemingly fit and healthy people who aren't diagnosed because they're too young to have cancer.
Yeah.
And of course, we know everybody, the sooner the better with diagnosis. And actually, the next interview that we're going to put out under season 2 is an interview with Stacey Hill, and she talks about her husband's misdiagnosis because he had I think he was lactose intolerant, but I might not be dead on that. God. Clang. First clanger of season 2. And of course, the symptoms of cancer can often look like symptoms of a gastric illness or a flu or a terrible cough.
The same happened with Sarah. She went into A&E twice, and both times were sent home saying it's neurovirus or a retrovirus. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I basically threw myself on the mercy of a local private hospital that we got the answers we needed.
Yeah, it's a very, very scary journey, and for anybody is out there and is on this horrible journey at the moment, we just wanted to let you know that we see you, and we know that what you're going through is really, really tough. So now that we've given you a little bit of an idea of who we are, I thought I'd just also tell you a little bit how we met. So John and I, we actually both joined WAY, which is Widowed and Young. If you're in the UK, you'll be aware of it, I imagine. And a few of us just really hit it off, and we planned a weekend up at the Big Pink House up in Cumbria.
House, yeah.
And so we set up a separate, WhatsApp group, and John's birthday was coming up. And we established that actually, despite the northern accent, he lived about 40 minutes from me. So I said, look, I'll take you out for something to eat. Because let's face it, the first birthday without your spouse is pretty shit, right?
It is very shit, yeah.
And we went for dinner, and one of us, me, got quite squiffy. And as John dropped me off, I sort of went into the house, and then I don't know what made me do it, just impulsivity. And I just turned around, he wound the window down the car, and we kissed. And it was one of those moments where it just felt really right. Mm-hmm. And neither of us was really in a position to be wanting a relationship. We were both still really reeling from the deaths of our spouses. And we both have children. I have 3 children. John has 1 daughter. And we sort of thought, let's just keep this as a friendship with, sorry, Dad, benefits. And actually what happened was something much deeper and much more permanent grew. And so we blended our families. And John had a bit of a close call with COVID. Again, I'll refer you back to season 1, like that episode. But it condensed the relationship in terms of we created a home together much quicker than we perhaps would have done. But it's that baptism of fire thing, isn't it? If you can survive lockdown with each other, you can probably, well, and you nearly didn't. You can. But
that wasn't through living together.
It wasn't.
That was being an early adopter.
I didn't drive him to it. And we now live all together in a house in Kent, and things, it comes with challenges. We're raising 4 children, but most of the time we have a pretty happy, settled family. And I think initially when we started the podcast, I felt that might be a bit kind of insulting almost, and people might be like, well, I don't want to hear how happy you are and all that. But actually what we found is people do want to know that there's potential light at the end of the tunnel, that it isn't going to be nothing but bleakness and sadness. And I remember saying to my mum, I'm just going to be sad for the rest of my life. I'm just going to survive. Yeah, that's it.
I was on the same thing as I was working out how old I'd be when Holly left home, and then I'd be completely on my own. But, that's the amount of time I had to settle it with myself.
And I guess it doesn't you don't necessarily have to meet somebody else in order to be happy. But if the opportunity does cross your door, I advise that you take it. I think that love is well, it's what we're here for, really, isn't it? And I think one of the things we hope to do with the podcast was to kind of open up our world a little bit and show people who haven't experienced this that if you do fall in love again, it doesn't mean that you don't love your partner, your husband, your wife. It means that your heart has the capacity to expand. Yeah. And I know this is something I've talked about a few times, but it's like having a child. It's not, but you know what I mean. In terms of you have your first one and you think, right, how can I possibly love another one like this? This little human has my entire heart. Well, you go on to have, some people go on to have more children and you love them the same. So don't be afraid and don't feel like you're disrespecting or being disloyal to somebody if you do have the opportunity to love again. Lecture over.
I just need to add something to it because it's a bit of a misconception, especially when you first enter the widow world, in that we have to live our life for the dead person. Whilst we do, by keeping their memories alive, you need to live the life for yourself. Yeah. Otherwise, this entire thing is unbearable if you're trying to live under someone else's shadow. Yeah, you're right. And I struggle with the idea when people say, oh, he's still with you, he's still watching you. And I'm thinking, is he? Because that's kind of weird. And at what point is he watching me? Because, I don't want to be watched all the time. If there's a pearly gates, there's going to be a fire, isn't there? So, We'll deal with that when the time comes, eh? Yeah. Now, we just actually come back from a family holiday talking about the dynamics of families, and I know that the Easter break can be pretty tough on all of us, actually, but I'm thinking primarily of people with children because it's a 2-week holiday. It can be longer in some counties, and weather dependent. There's not always much to do, and it can feel very much like everybody's getting together with family. They're doing all these lovely Instagram Easter hunts. They're going on holidays. And that can be quite difficult when you're on your own, or you maybe can't afford a holiday, or you're just in the chicken and wine phase where all you really want to do is swig from a bottle of vodka and hide from the world. So I guess I wanted to just send out a little bit of a flag of solidarity to those of you who are struggling. And I guess to tell you that I know it's cliche, but it does get easier. It does. We took the kids on. We took them abroad. Which I have to say, the first time I flew with the kids on my own was awful. It was so stressful. And I thought at the time, I'm never doing this again. But of course, the lure of the sunshine. And I think there's at least once on every holiday where I swear I'm never going on holiday with the kids again. But it actually was, as far as family holidays go, it was pretty easy. It was just a package holiday, all-inclusive resort in Turkey, as is often the case. Not quite as it advertised itself, but the weather was great. The ice cream was included, so I just let them, live their best lives, eating 7 ice creams a day. And they embraced it. Yeah, they certainly did. Yeah. And it was a really nice holiday, if I'm honest. It was, but
there's a but. Whilst we were on holiday, it was the first day, and we'd gone down to the pool, as you do, and we thought, let's go down to the beach. Now, despite the way my husband died, I love the sea and I love the beach, and I feel free when I'm in the water. So I say this, not if there's a tide, not if there's a current.
With caveats.
Yeah, this was quite a nice little bay. It was very calm. It was like a mill pond. And we spent a couple of hours sort of, sitting in the water and, sunbathing. And it wasn't until later that day that I realised that one of my rings was not on. And that ring was my engagement ring from Ben. And I'd had it remodelled in using my wedding ring and added some gold to it and had it made into like an everyday ring. And I feel ridiculous because I'm absolutely devastated. I'm fairly certain it was lost in the sea. There's a serendipity in that, right? And I posted on local Facebook groups, and I hope that the power of social media might bring it back to me. But the odds are not good. And actually, my track record of finding things. No, don't go there. That's too dark. No. It's a thing. It's just a thing.
It doesn't. No. I know that's what you're saying, and that's what we say when we're still alive. But it's not. There's a lot of sentiment and attached to it. And it is quite a magnitude, quite the magnitude of a loss.
Yeah, I think it's.
And you shouldn't dismiss it or diminish it. You'll also find out I can't speak.
It's just been a constant on my finger now for like nearly 20 years, and I think I really miss it. And Ben proposed to me in Rome. It wasn't the most romantic of proposals, romantic place, but it was a go on then, will you? And we picked the ring together, and it had to be resized because I've got fingers like sausages. So all the sort of memories of getting lost in those cobbled streets, not being able to find the shop, and that, I guess it symbolised hope and love and like a time of innocence, because neither of us knew what was waiting for us, and I wouldn't change the life I had for anything. I loved the life I had with Ben, and this ring, again, I feel quite emotional, but it's irreplaceable. And John very sweetly offered, we could go back to Rome and find the shop and ask him to make me one. But I don't think that would work. I don't know. I'm going to let it sit for a bit, and see how I feel. But I felt a form of bereavement over this ring. It was really, it really surprised me, actually, the magnitude of the loss I felt. And I think perhaps there's an element of, this isn't in my notes, I'm going rogue, of a guilt attached to the fact, and I said this to you on holiday, I said I should have gone and looked for Ben, and you were like, what? No, you shouldn't. Don't be ridiculous. But I imagine it's expired now, but a qualified diver. And in this, I think at the back of my head, there's like this, I should have gone down and looked, just to, it would have been stupid and reckless and foolish, and I'm actually glad I didn't. But I didn't know I had that kind of repressed feeling until I was out with the kids' goggles on, just going, the security guards really did think I was mental, because we had one day of bad weather, and it was that day that I went up and down, like, paddling up and down this little shallow of water looking for it. And I suppose I kept thinking each day I should go back out, what more can I do? But at some point, much like I had to with Ben, you have to accept that something is lost, and that you're not going to get it back. And it did cause me to go into a bit of a low. It only lasted a day. It stayed with me, but I was able to kind of, I don't want to say suppress it, because I really don't like the thought of suppressing these emotions, but this was a family holiday, and I had 4 kids who needed me to be present and to have and so I sort of put it into that Pandora's box.
Well, it actually moves into how you're supposed to deal with grief, which is you're supposed to let yourself sit with it, but then go, right, I'm done now.
I'm going to put that away a bit. And most days I did have a cry, and I cried when we left. As we drove, as the taxi took us to the airport, because I really felt I was leaving it behind. But what's the alternative? I stay in Turkey? It was nice, but I don't want to live there.
No.
So there isn't really another option other than to walk away. but it did stir up a lot of feelings, and it actually kind of prompted some conversations with my children, and particularly my eldest, who's a strapping, great big teenager now, and he's a. I know everyone thinks their kids are lovely, but not always when they're teenagers. But he's a really lovely kid, and he
is.
He bore the brunt of his dad's death the hardest, really, because he was the oldest. And we talked a lot about his feeling, and I won't betray his confidence because that's not fair. But it prompted some conversations between us that we perhaps hadn't had. And this is he won't mind me saying this, but one of the things was I hadn't really talked about him about the possibility of Ben's body being found.
Yeah.
I'm aware that it's a possibility, or it may not be. Mm-hmm. The RNLI said to me that he could be found tomorrow, or it could be one of these unsolved mysteries in 100 years. They don't know. What he was wearing a what's called a dry suit for non-divers out there. It basically is you have to do a special course to learn to dive in them because it works differently, but you stay dry. Obviously, clues in the name, isn't it? Really, I don't need to explain it. But he would have been weighted. It's designed to keep you at the bottom of the sea. So. But I guess we do need to prepare for that being a possibility and for that knock at the door or the phone call. And I guess it prompted me to think I need to have that conversation with the kids because I don't want, they've had enough shock. They don't need another shock.
They don't want the shock.
And actually, I may have talked about this last season, but I can't remember. Somebody did reach out to me because a member of Way, their husband had gone missing during a climbing expedition and his body's never been found. And she was asking for advice on this presumption of death certificate, which I had to get for Ben. But unfortunately, I don't think they were, I think it was because he was on his own, so there was no eyewitnesses. It looked like it wasn't going to be a possibility for her. Yeah. But of course, these are things that until you experience them, you don't know it's an issue. No,
and it's quite it's well, it could have been quite complicated because you didn't have access to his bank accounts. Mm-hmm. There was finance and payments going out that you needed to do, and you could have lost your house and everything because
without my parents, who are tenacious and supportive and pretty awesome actually, they made multiple phone calls on my behalf, multiple emails. And things like they managed to get my mortgage put onto interest only for 6 months, just to give me that breathing space. But yeah, had I not been able to access his life insurance, which by no means made me wealthy, it didn't actually even pay my mortgage off, but it enabled me to breathe. And I think money is another thing that's quite difficult to talk about when somebody dies, because we all know the cliches of the family swarming around to hear the will reading and fighting over what's left. And
sorry to just interrupt, but let's be clear: wills change people.
Yeah, they do, and actually, Ben's will left everything to his mum, but because we had married since he'd written it, it was void. But of course, those are things. Ben had been married before, so. We weren't married, it's so. Actually, while we're here, if you haven't got a will, please get one. Yeah. Please get one, because if you genuinely don't know whether you're going to die tomorrow. Yeah. It's a morbid, horrible thought, but Ben didn't know he was going to die that day.
No. And if you're not a widow and listening to us, and you're in a couple, just do a bit of an investigation into power of attorneys. For each other.
In case, yes, of course, because when you were in a coma,
you couldn't do anything because I was in a coma.
No, we weren't married, and I had no legal guardianship for Holly or anything like that. Which, again, these are all things that you don't need to know until you need to know. But life insurance in a will, even if you have life insurance that will cover your mortgage when you die, I can only assume that Ben took it out when we lived in our old house, because I can't understand how he got away with life insurance that didn't pay the mortgage off.
Yeah, probably.
But that's by the by. But yes, I went and had my will done because I guess I realised that if I was to die suddenly, there was nothing in place to say he would look after my children. And that, even if you haven't got assets, you need to write down who you want to take your children. Because
your wishes. Yeah,
and actually, if the children come with a financial inheritance, of course, that again can bring out the worst in people. So this is becoming a bit of a tangent here, but I Get a will. If you haven't got a will, get a will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always expensive either. There's lots of people that would do it and lots of charities that will do it for donation.
Yeah.
So it's, get a will.
And we even have some of our guests who do that as a business now, don't they?
We do. Emma Gray. Yes, Emma Gray. Rainbow
hunting.
Rainbow hunting. There we go. I don't like to give out the
There you go. Free plug for you there, Emma.
And actually, I'm just thinking about an anecdote from holiday, which I'm going to share, because in this world, you become a little bit desensitised to, and we're quite dark humoured. That's how we really met, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll say things and you watch the other person look at you like you are a monster. But it also can be quite funny sometimes. While we were on holiday, there was a dad on his own with 2 girls at the same resort. And I can't help myself. I feel like I picture you on that first holiday you went on with Holly, and this idea of you just being on your own and grieving. And I think if you're a woman, it's easier because women do tend to chat, and I just think we find it easier to communicate. And so this dad was just sort of chat. His girls were playing with our girls, and I just went to him, dead or divorced? And he, I'm sorry, what? I was like, is your partner, are you on your own because your partner's dead, or are you divorced? And he just looked at me and I was like, oh no, that's not normal conversation, is it?
Well, obviously not dead.
No, she's, otherwise he didn't know. But I guess that's another thing is your compassion and the way you view people changes, and you're always thinking, oh, are they okay? Like,
yeah.
Because we know what it's like to be that kind of troll that's on the outside looking in. But yeah, it's dead or divorced. It's just, don't ask people that out of the blue. They don't like it. Well, with that, we'll draw the episode to a bit of a close. But I'm also aware going into the final term of the school year. And for us, this is going to symbolise quite a big change because we've got 2 children in year 6. Now, my son Hector, he's going to stay in his school. He's in a specialist school. But your daughter, Holly, is going to be moving up to secondary.
She is.
And we'll talk about this more as it gets closer, but I think it's quite important that we acknowledge how difficult transitions like this are without their other parent around, because you have to choose the school. We actually didn't get into the school we chose, so we are now playing chicken with the education authority. We've declined.
It's not a game of chicken.
We've declined the school because it's the worst school in the county. That's what we got offered. So we're playing chicken. We're not moving. They're not moving. We'll see.
Who'll blink first?
Yeah, who'll blink first? But you have to do all of this, and you're getting them ready for this kind of next chapter of their lives, which we know is going to be quite challenging because teenagers are challenging, and that the difference between primary and secondary is so enormous,
isn't it? You should do an intermediary.
Yeah, like the Americans do, don't they? They have middle school. Yeah, because you go. I mean, they just look so little. They look massive in year 6, and then suddenly they look really little. And I guess lots of people out there will have children. We've been through the youngest starting school. We've had one go to secondary already. So we've a little practice in this, but I think each time it stirs up a lot of big feelings and what ifs, and I guess lots of that, if they could only see them now, that feeling. So for other people out there who are perhaps gearing up to their child starting school, perhaps they were leaving secondary school, perhaps they're flying the nest and going off to university, whatever big events are coming up, I suppose what I'm trying to say in a rather convoluted way is that we are going to share with you what comes our way, aspects of our life as it happens, kind of real life widowing, if you will, and we hope that will be helpful to you. And if you are battling any issues that you haven't heard us talk about, please do send us suggestions. We're more than happy to receive them. And we are taking bookings for season 2. We are booked up until, I think, the end of summer, possibly even up to October.
I think there might be some gaps in in the weeks, but
Okay.
it's in the scheduling system.
So if you are interested in coming on and telling your story, but you're perhaps thinking, oh, it's not quite yet, get yourself into the system. We will check in with you before we stick a microphone at you, so you can postpone. What we would ask though is we've only had one person just completely cancel. We just ask if you aren't going to be able to make your schedule start, if you just let us know, because we do have a waiting list. So don't like to be bossy.
And to fill in the form, just go to our website, www.widowedaf.com, and at the top there is a button that says tell us your story.
And on the website, we have Woodstock tickets. So again, for the uninitiated, Woodstock is our festival, which we're hoping is going to be an annual thing. It's being held in Kent, and we're only able to sell 500 tickets. We've kept it fairly smallish because we've never done this before. But tickets are selling, guys. So if you do want to come, you will need to get your ticket fairly soon. And also we've got merchandise on there. So if you'd like a stylish WAF hoodie or a mug or a knockoff Stanley Cup.
Or a hat.
Or hats. We're just listening. Then that's also available on our website. But for now, guys, thank you for listening. I will be back with you with an interview with Stacey Heal. Look forward to speaking to you next.
Goodbye, everybody.